Okay.
All right, welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. Today, I have a very important guest. Her name is Melisa Corley. She has a YouTube channel called Missy's Naturals and Holistic Health. On TikTok, she is Melisa and Little Ben Corley. But more importantly, I think, is her story that she's about to share here, because she's in what I would consider one of the toughest situations to deal with. And it goes over a lot of key points. It goes over how to get out when you're being financially controlled, how to deal with the abusive aspects of the situation, how to deal with it when there's kids involved, how to deal with it in the courts. But I don't want to talk about it. We'll let Melisa talk about it here. So how are you today, Melisa?
I'm good. I'm good. Every day is a blessing.
So if we start from the beginning here, you had a relationship, it was a marriage with your baby's dad, that you had 6 kids with him. And that
Yes.
one wasn't too bad, you said. You said he was not perfect, but it was.
Right. We divorced. I would say typical marriage kind of stuff. We divorced. We didn't even we hired attorneys, but we didn't have to. We came to a mutual agreement. We had a farm, and I kept the farm, and I had a business, and I was homeschooling our children. So I kind of went on with my life, and he moved out and went on with his. And we were able to, we didn't see eye to eye on everything, but we were able to get along.
Right.
After that, so, and I will not do this ever again. I had gotten on a dating website, and I met my soulmate.
There you go.
And don't get me wrong, this guy had, a lot of points that he hit for me. Had a family farm, and, he was a Christian dad and had 2 kids, and the mom was crazy, had left for meth and blah, blah, blah. So I'm already raising mine. My oldest had gotten married. She was out of the house. And then I have 5. He has 2. Within 6 weeks, we get married. Yeah, it was toxic. I mean, I did not see it for that at that time, but it was very, should have gone a whole lot slower and listened to a whole lot more of what was being said about the exes to figure out where I was. Come to find out, there was a girlfriend that had just left for abuse, having his child in the NICU in Jackson, Mississippi, while we were saying I do. Didn't give enough time to figure out what was really going on. And I was financially stable, could have just taken it a lot slower, but was totally swept off my feet, and thought this was, the love of my life. Little did I know, shortly thereafter, there were some problems with the house on the farm, and we just packed up the kids, we packed up the animals, and we moved to a place on his family's farm. And it got very toxic. I wasn't allowed to have doorknobs. Anytime I left the house, I had to have a child with me. Financially, I did have my business account, but it was still very controlled. The house was put in him and his dad's name, but our vehicle, we were talked into putting it in his mom's name. I was worried about, because I'd always paid cash for things, and having a farm, you have capital. So you can sell a cow, you can sell a piece of equipment, you can, and buy and pay cash also. So I didn't really have any need for credit, and wasn't one to like to have bills. So I wanted to start working on my credit, and that wasn't allowed. So slowly but surely, the noose began to kind of wrap around my neck. In order to get out of that,
I have a couple of questions about that real quick. So I guess first and foremost, the rushing part, that is a common scenario that I hear where things go really quickly. And I would always caution people to be really careful when somebody wants to really rush you like that, because 6 weeks is pretty quick to be getting married. And it's a thing. It's a thing that happens. I see it happen a lot with narcissistic relationships, but be mindful when someone's trying to rush, just for the people listening out there. And then secondly, once you were married and then you moved in, how quickly did these behaviors of controlling come up?
Very quickly. I mean, after I got married. It was not a year into it, and the violence started. It was irrational violence, from a small argument. It would turn quickly into choking or me being beaten in the head, or, and I'm not going to say that I'm a perfect person, but the acts of violence were so extreme on just a small action. And it wasn't even just me, it was the children as well. So lack of self-control, online with women, on dating websites, porn. There were a lot of things going on that you realize. And then at the time, I felt as stuck as a duck because I had 5 kids in this. He had 2. Then I get pregnant, and we find out we're having a child with Down syndrome. So at that point in time, there's no way I'm going to buck that. I'm, wanting the best for my new baby on the way. But it got to the point where there was no way I could stay. I feared for my life. And with the financial control, I actually had to start. I sold all my animals. I sold my horse trailer, my cows, a lot of farm equipment. And we had just got the stimulus check in 2020. And I just paid for a pool, a $6,000 huge above ground pool for all the kids to have something to do for the summer. So I'm thinking, I put as much money into it. I helped pay for upgrades on the house. I put, every dime I could into either helping to pay the bills as well as was working. My YouTube channel was previously a homesteader YouTube channel. I traveled and I sold my essential oils and my natural products, herbal salves and things through my website. So I had money coming in, but it was still being spent as fast as I could bring it in, whether on our home, our children. His ex is nowhere around at this point. She is gone. I was told that she was crazy. She left for meth and that. So I went with that, and I became their mom. I was making birthday cakes and buying their clothes and buying their shoes and homeschooling them. And and I would give like responsibilities, like when you've got 7 kids in a house,
that's a lot.
You're living military style. We wake up, we wash our face, we brush our teeth. You've got garbage cans, you've got toilet paper, everybody has to make their bed, and we have to meet at the table by 8:15 to start schoolwork. That was interpreted by his mother as using the children as slave labor. So then the stress of the whole situation, whether it was the violence or the control, not being able to go to the store or to the post office where I would drop off my packages without a child with me, because I was always up to no good. And I thought, I don't have time to be up to no good.
Right.
So I ended up divorcing him at that point, and I did have some support. I had a lady who offered me her home in Arkansas. I moved 4 hours away. The divorce got very messy. I had put some information out, really because I was in fear for my life. The police were friends of his family, and they would not even come to the house half the time if I called. One time I was covered in bruises. The prosecutor would not even touch it, although the judge did issue a simple assault. When we went to the hearing, she wouldn't even touch it and prosecute. I later found out she's a close family friend. So in small town Mississippi, you have no rights whatsoever if these people have any friends, pool, family.
He had connections there too, didn't he?
Yeah. So I leave, and let me take that back. For putting it on the internet, his aunt was the judge in town. She puts 2 felony warrants out for my arrest for putting it on the internet that I was afraid for my life and that the police would not come. That's all I said. He had broken into the house on the children with a crowbar and scared the crap out of them. I wasn't home. I just put it out there that I'd called the sheriff's department. They didn't even come. They didn't even come. I mean, they just got to where they didn't care. I don't know how else to say that. So then I get 2 felonies put out for my arrest. I ended up leaving, going to the safe house in Tupelo. I stayed there with my children. We did work out a divorce, and I left. I went to Arkansas.
How did you find that friend? Is that a friend that you had from previously, or did you
I had made friends through social media because I was not really allowed to have friends. The only
And this is
places
key
I could,
point. This is key here too, I think,
right.
because you had
We
said he
lived in a
was
very
feeling
small
at you
town.
too from all of them.
We lived in a very small town in Mississippi, and I moved. This person always got his victims from other towns. So whether it was the ex-girlfriend from Jackson or me from a different part of Mississippi or a girlfriend from Tennessee, but they always come, and they're only allowed to be around his family or his friends at church or the people he knows. And I began to see a change in the way I was being treated by people and did not even have a clue about the devaluing and about the smear campaign. So by the time it built up that I began to speak out about the domestic violence and things, or, being fearful of my life, these people had already been told for a solid year I was crazy. So that may be why the police didn't come. I don't know, but it began to, the best thing I could say is watch the movie Invisible Man. If you watch how that whole thing is controlled, he gets her sister on his team by writing a letter like it's her acting crazy. Everybody does think at a time she's crazy. Nobody believes her. So I kind of went through that with my family. I had friends through social media that I would share pictures and videos with because I was so scared for my life and had no one around me that believed me. I later realized that his mother was also a covert narcissist. She was sneaking in the house and reporting back to him on how I cleaned the house, or if I didn't, or what she thought of it, or whatever situation she may make up about child slave labor. Or my kids come to me one day and say, Mom, we found your wedding picture at her home with your face gouged out and black marker scribbled on top of your face. So there was a lot of weird things that I was noticing from my mother-in-law at that time that I kept saying, are you sure? Because it's just so out there. And yeah, the kids were like, Mom, she is not on your team. Do you not see this? We went to a retirement party and she names the whole family by name, including children and grandchildren, but leaves me out of it.
Very purposefully too, no doubt.
Right.
Because she had a unique relationship with your ex there. Like they were
very
enmeshed.
Yeah. The best way, I didn't know about enmeshment and narcissistic mothers. And the only way that I could describe it like to him was she wants to be your wife. And like I pointed out, you were married for a time to this other woman. And as long as y'all lived out of town, you stayed married. The minute you came home, you got divorced. What is up with that?
Right.
I later find out that his brother and his wife moved out of town 4 hours away because of the enmeshment that she has with all of her sons.
Now, how do you deal with that part of it?
They are very private. They don't even really want me to speak about it, but I have had to have that conversation with my sister-in-law at the time because I was just grasping at straws. Like, somebody explain to me what is happening. How could I have married my soulmate and my whole world's falling apart and I'm getting abused and the cops won't even come to the house? Like, this is insane. Well, I moved to Arkansas and then we ended up working it out. Like within 2 months, we get back together. I totally have to accept.
Let me pause you there too. How was he able to pull you back in that case? Because I think that's important to go over too. And what was going through your mind as well, because it's part of the trauma bond as well, of course.
It wasn't very hard. It wasn't very hard. We began to talk over the phone about our child, and it just wasn't very hard. I was extremely trauma bonded. I was living in complete and total denial that this was really as crazy as it had turned out. And I was also in brain fog. I could barely get up and wash my face, brush my teeth, take care of my children. You go through that, and the best way I know how to describe it is like, you feel like you're on drugs, but you're not on drugs. You just can't think. Right. You can't put one foot in front of the other. And so I'm watching the YouTube videos and I'm trying to learn about what's going on. And I'm half believing them and I'm half believing maybe it was me, but you're addicted to this person like you are drugs, dopamine. And the intermittent rewards that you're getting from the situation seem to kind of weigh out all the negative. Though it shouldn't, it does. Because at this point, you're totally trauma bonded. So then what I did was went back. His mom at this point says, it's your wife or me. And this is when I realized the whole family was toxic, because the whole family began to use the Southern Baptist religion to tell him he was going to hell for getting back with his wife. So I realize now that his mind and his need for control and manipulation is basically coming from childhood trauma that's lasted up in his whole life. And we agreed to move off of their family farm because they tell him you're losing your whole inheritance. We hate our guts, blah, blah, blah. So we moved to another small town and we begin to remodel a house. We get into counseling probably for the third or fourth time. After one or two counseling sessions, and the counselor's like, the abuse, the control, the other women, the porn, whatever it is not okay. And you've got to be able to let yourself be held accountable if you want this to work. So after one or two sessions, we're done.
And he wouldn't have any of that. He wouldn't take any of their suggestions, more than likely. Or he probably had a problem with them all too. But to rewind a little bit here too, I think when someone leaves and is trying to go no contact, or least amount of contact when it comes to co-parenting or counter-parenting, it's best to keep it simple, because like you said, that brain fog and the intermittent rewards of the trauma bond, it can suck people back in, and the Hoovers work. So I always tell people, keep it real simple. And it's just like a drug. It's like you just say no. And the second you catch yourself thinking more than just say no, and start maybe deering, as they call it, defending, excusing, explaining, or rationalizing, that's something to pin and say, okay, why am I doing this? But when you keep it simple, no, just no means no. And we're going to do what I have to do to parent our kid. But then that's it. Right. And the second someone thinks more, it's like, that's the trauma bond talking now. And it's just something to pay attention to.
You don't realize how you get sucked in so easily. I mean, like, you should have a natural fear of the situation, this person, these people, whatever it is, but you don't. And you don't realize it can be a simple conversation about the child. And then before you know it, you're reminiscing in your own mind, or you're ruminating, and you're thinking, you're making excuses. That's the best way I know how to put it. But we moved to this new house, and he puts it in his mom's name. So there again, total financial control. Yes. Total financial control. That way, if for some reason we had remarried, if I left again, they would have total control of the situation. I actually had to threaten this woman at one point with suing her for contributing to alienation of affection, because she absolutely is obsessed with him and won't leave him alone. So the fact that, and poor guy, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not making excuses, but like, the level of manipulation and control, I can understand why he is the way he is. Now, he would have to seek help. No excuses being made, but I see how narcissistic mothers enmesh themselves in these sons, and the sons sadly end up sociopathic.
Yeah.
I mean, and they fear losing a woman to the point where they're willing to harm her because of whatever issues they have with their mom. And that's a whole nother story topic.
With the narcissistic mothers there, I see it go one of two ways. One way is that way, where they're really obsessed with the kid, trying to get their own needs met through the kid, and there's enmeshment, and they're really over-involved and controlling. And then there's another way, though. The other way I see it sometimes go is when the mom's just completely absent and neglectful. And maybe that might be a mixture of like borderline in there too. But in that case, they're out to lunch, and they're more interested in like other men or something than their own children. So those are the two dichotomies that I see with the cluster B mothers.
I would say my mother was also, and I'm going to put this out there. Y'all can say whatever you want. I see a lot of controlling mothers over their daughters, narcissistic mothers, and the daughter ends up with a narcissist or a person who commits violence on them because that's what they're used to.
Right.
And they don't understand. Sometimes the males just take it to a new level, but that's how they were raised. And I will say that is exactly true of my mom. So when I began to realize this, I left him again. I take the kids again. No. I didn't leave. This is a thing this is a very important. Don't ever tell a narcissist you're going to leave. The night that I said I was going to leave, he came in there, he beat me in the head. He took my child and he went to his mother's house, and I had to go to the hospital. I reported it to the law, but once again, they would not investigate my injuries. It was just y'all need to work on your marriage. You really got some problems. You're both crazy. I ended up going to the domestic violence shelter. They took me before a judge with my hospital report, and they issued a pickup order, and I got to go get my child back. Crazy, weird thing. The officer who went to get my child said, well, it wasn't even your husband who threw a fit about giving your child back. It was his mother. Yep. Isn't that crazy? That is sick. So then I stay at the domestic violence shelter for a time, and I move in with my mother. And at this time, I had 3 children. The older ones had moved in with their father, the one I had been married to for 16 years. They were done with the whole drama of the situation.
Now, let me rewind though real quick here. So did you make a plan to leave? So once you came back and then you realized that something was wrong and you tried to get out again, you made the mistake of telling him that you were going to leave. And then he beat you for doing that. So how were you able to get out from that point on? Because I mean, normally what I tell people is make a plan, you notify friends, family, law enforcement. Unfortunately, in your case, law enforcement doesn't sound like they were much help, but you just left. After that you just left and you went to the domestic violence or abuse shelter.
Yeah. That night I said I was going to leave, and I looked at later that night, about 10:30 or 11, I had looked at his phone, because normally if we were in an argument, he would be talking to someone else online or porn or whatever it is. But I saw, how do I get my wife committed? And I thought, okay, now I can't keep blindly. So I screenshotted that, saved it. Earlier in the evening, he tried to set me up with drugs. It was when I finished, I've gotten 2 chapters in when I finished my book, but it really was nutty. I had nails thrown in my driveway at one point. I had to replace 5 tires on a Suburban in 1 month. But that's definitely trauma bonded when you go back to that situation. Sure. So I told him that night that I was going to leave later. That was when he came in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, jumps across the bed and starts beating me in the head, and took the baby, goes to his mom, and broke my phone, so I couldn't call the police. That happened, I don't know how many times. I mean, I changed phone numbers and had new phones constantly because he would get mad and break my phone. Or if I took a picture of something for evidence. So my daughter was there, and I woke her up, and it was crazy because my kids began to be able to just jump and bob and weave. They were so used to it. I was like, he broke my phone. He took the baby. He beat me in the head. She's like, I got you, mama. There's an old phone right here. Pop your SIM card out. Here's your phone. You can call the police. Well, of course, the police wouldn't even hear my side of it. He had already called them and told them that I beat him, and it was in self-defense. So once again, small town Mississippi. And if you can sell, if you have friends and you don't know anyone there, the victim doesn't know anyone there, you can hang it up. Whether your only friends are the people you run into on Sunday at church or at the grocery store, and they've already been told for the last year or so that you're nuts.
Now, what did they say about it though, too? Like once you told them about what was going on, they just didn't believe you because he was smearing you so much to them?
Sadly, I went to the preacher 3 times, and on the 3rd time he goes, well, he had these same problems with his ex-wife. I don't know what else to tell you. Find out that the family is a big donator to the church. Again, very small rural town, and they rule the roost. And even my mother told me not to go back. She feared he would kill me and get away with it. And now my mother and my oldest daughter were two big sources of support they could have been. But he told me, you don't need to talk to them. Don't you understand their attitude? They don't like me. They're trying to break us up. Now that we are on divorce number 2, they're on his side. I literally walked into the courthouse and saw my mother and my oldest daughter, who did not live even in anywhere near us the entire time we were married for both marriages. She just moved back from Texas, and now she's testifying for this guy. And I'm going, this could not get any stranger.
And that was your mom doing that.
My mom and my oldest daughter. And
So
they know about.
And he was able to turn them.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, here's the key. It was the same people he told me not to talk to.
Of course.
So the same people that you're forbidding from talking to ends up being the people you can expect to come against you in court or for custody. I was also arrested recently, about 4 months ago, for a supposed assault on him and his girlfriend that never happened. So there's another $1,500 to a criminal attorney. I mean, it gets to the point where if they can out-money you, if they can out-friend you in the community, if they can out-connection you, none of it's true. I was accused a week ago of drug and alcohol use, pass tests, do more hair follicle tests. But I don't know. They're really good charmers. They're really good manipulators. But to go back is not just dangerous, but you will lose everything. Also, you need to have a plan, and don't tell anyone. I wouldn't tell maybe one person, and you need to save money. The financial control is how they keep you stuck. Once they have control, the house in his mom's name, vehicles in his parents' name, it was almost weird because I kept saying, well, we're grown adults. We're in our 40s. Why are we putting anything in your parents' name? It's our credit's not that good. Well, I didn't have a lot of credit, but I figured it was very strange.
Little things. Those little things are something to not ignore. And real quick, unless the sun's in your eyes, are you able to move forward a little bit?
Yeah, it is in my eyes. Pretty, I apologize.
Because you're like, we're half in the shadow, half not in the shadow.
Let's see if I can just walk to a different spot. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, and I have talked about this with people on my YouTube channel, and he has harassed me on my YouTube channel. I've had 3 different protective orders, stalked in person, and it's still such a fight because I'm going, I have all this evidence. I have all this proof. I have these pictures. I have a hospital visit. I have domestic violence protection orders. It's insane. But when they have connections, it is like beating your head against a wall, and you cannot make heads or tails of why. It's, they're very good manipulators. Right. And when you're an honest person and you're not out to manipulate, or you're not trying to get ahead or take them for money, you can't understand what is the goal here. To be perfectly honest with you, the last time I left with 2 bags of clothes and my son. That's it. I was so done that now I argued for my belongings in court, and it was said that someone else came and picked my stuff up. Well, that excuse was given for like 6 months to a year. Now it said that I abandoned my stuff. They changed their story so many times, and you're going, how are you getting away with this? Right. And then, of course, when we finally get to go to trial, all the smoke and mirrors and false allegations come up, and they just drag it out, and they make it such a headache. So I understand why people wouldn't want to leave, but do you want to live like that? Life is so much better.
Now, how do you maintain your sanity throughout all of this? And another thing to go over would be, how did you pick your lawyer? Because I think it's pretty important in a case like this to have a lawyer who at least understands what's going on, to have somebody on your team and who understands narcissistic abuse a little bit?
Okay, sadly, this is lawyer number 3 for the second divorce, and it's very hard because everybody sees it as tit for tat. So I can be going with straight facts and evidence, and he can be going with false allegations, false assault charges, or whatever, and they just see it as a back and forth. So I spent the last year really studying Rebecca Zung and she's called the Narc Slayer, her program of strategy. But you have to go in there, and lawyers are going to tell you, yes, I believe you. Yes, I'll fight for you. But at some point, if things are not being, moves are not being made in your favor, you have to say, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work anymore. And then you have to just somehow or another, by the grace of God, I've been able to keep my sanity. Now, in the middle of that, I did start drinking, and I did have to go to AA, and I did have to address my addiction because it got so crazy. I didn't have family support. I didn't have financial support, and it's been really and truly God helping me get through from one step to another. I got back in school. I totally took on taking care of yourself and self-care. I totally embraced, I work out every single every day without fail, whether I want to or not. I learned to recognize emotions for what they are, whether it's in me, because our emotions get the best of us, and that's when we become addicted. And most people who are addicted have been through a lot of trauma. I've made a lot of friends in the recovery community who will tell you that every single person they talk to with an addiction is dealing with some sort of domestic violence, childhood trauma, narcissistic abuse.
Definitely.
And that's so we can eat our emotions, and that's one that won't get you put in jail. We can drink our emotions. We can become a gambler. We can become addicted to drugs or alcohol. And those are the ones you get caught for. But all in all, it affects your health. So I began to take on the idea that I wanted to heal by mind, body, and spirit. I pray and meditate. I work out every single day. I keep myself busy. I work. I invest all my free time into my children and rebuilding a relationship that was destroyed. And I have to take some part in that because of my alcohol addiction. And then I also I went back to school to be certified. I had practiced holistic healthcare before, and herbs and essential oils and all that, but I wanted to be certified so that I can see clients and I can help people understand their trapped trauma. I'm sorry.
Now back to what you were saying about your ex though too. They choose the best defense is an offense to them. And unfortunately, like you said, it looks like a tit for tat in that scenario too, but they're really just striking first. And that's where it would be so crucial. And maybe you didn't have a lawyer that understood, but it'd be crucial to get a lawyer that understands that kind of dynamic where, hey, they're going with a false allegation first, so that even when you respond with the truth, it just looks like a tit for tat. And it's like, it takes some savvy lawyers and judges, etc., to really see through that. And that's what's so frustrating.
You have to. My dad was in the military, and at a time in my teenage years, I lived with him, and he had me running 3 miles a day, and he had me at school and practice, and I had to kind of go back in time and reset. And I had to say, okay, I need to have my life needs to be completely structured. My mind needs to be completely focused on myself and my well-being. I need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can do to heal myself and understand what I went through. Then I can help others. And that's a part of any recovery program, whether it's, domestic violence or narcissistic abuse. Then you can think clearly enough to decipher what's going on. Once you can think clearly, and you go through the thing with finding a good attorney and developing a strategy, and you realize, okay, I've got custody or I've got assets on the line, then you can almost sit back and watch them overplay their hand. And because their allegations against you never stop. And they begin to spiral out of control with their allegations. And I got a text message about a month ago, a nude video of the new girlfriend. Go to co-parenting. It becomes one of those things where you have to learn to take one for the team, have yourself completely together financially, have yourself completely together mentally, and understand that it is a battle. You are in a war, and it is a war to take you down any way possible. And sadly, I think it's 65% of victims of domestic violence end up being killed by their partner. So if they don't win through the courts, or if they
60%?
Yeah, it's really high. It's 60 to 65%.
Being killed.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to look up that. I haven't heard that one.
When I went to the domestic violence shelter the second time, they sat me down and they made me watch. I think it was Amy's story in Massachusetts, up there where you are, and or it could be Pennsylvania, but Amy's story, and it was typical narcissism turned violent, turned deadly. And they did come up with a law for her. And when you sit back and you know that this is not sane, but you still go back to it, you have to question your sanity. You have to start questioning, what is keeping you in that? That's your trauma bond. And when you do get out, whether it's the battle through the courts, whether it's the co-parenting, you have to treat it like a war, and you have to keep yourself stable. So I say, I read my Bible. I don't go to church because the church condones a lot of this.
How do they do that? That's a good thing to go over too. I think one of the things they'll do is they try to weaponize forgiveness, for example, and try to guilt trip people into not doing what's best for them.
Right. And if you look at narcissists in general, they typically have the deacon role. Mine was singing in the choir. So was his mom. They typically have the roles that the church members admire because they're always giving. They're the first one to show up when you got cancer. They're bringing their potluck to the after church dinner. They're the ones that everybody thinks is just, Mr. and Mrs. Jesus. And whether it is the submissiveness of a wife taught in the churches, and that the husband runs the home, or whether it's just in general, we like these people, they show up every Sunday, they donate. I'm not sure what it is, but I know that religious manipulation is a huge one with narcissists. It was used on me, and I bought into it willingly because I was wanting to be close to God and do what was right, and the whole Jesus thing. But now I realize that if one's not doing their part, the other one is not obligated to do that. For overly forgive. Don't get me wrong, there is a place for forgiveness, but you begin to be a willing victim. At some point, you're a willing victim. At some point, I can say for myself that I have gotten so far out of it now and been able to think through and work through addiction and work through the trauma bond and work through the brain fog, that at this point, I have to say, looking back, you're scared. I was scared for my life. I was scared because I couldn't make it financially. I had no family support, none, and a child with Down syndrome. I remember asking some of my family members, can I stay with you? And they were like, no, we don't want that drama here. So I had no family support. And now that I'm on my own and I'm on my own 2 feet, I'm like, wow, I can do it. But it's that fear of security. It's that fear of not pleasing God. It's that fear of not being forgiven. Because if you don't forgive, you don't get forgiven.
Well, I think what people need to remember is with forgiveness does not mean you have to let someone back into your life. And it can be pretty similar to acceptance. But forgiveness does not mean, you have to invite people who have mistreated you back into your life. No, you can forgive from afar. You can forgive and keep it where it is, right? You don't have to let them back in. You can keep them distant from you. Because ultimately, I don't care whether someone calls it forgiveness or just acceptance of what happened, but regardless, I want people to just be able to let go of resentment towards it, and whatever way they can to do that is, I think, what's beneficial. Now, And that because when you're resentful and really angry, even justifiably so, it doesn't help too much to stay in that state. But you look at it in whatever way you can so that you're the happiest and healthiest version of you today. That's what I would say for people to do. And you don't let them guilt trip you.
Focus on you.
Right.
Because
And
that's
you
all
don't
you
let
can
them
change.
manipulate you and guilt you into letting them back in, because that's when the cycle of abuse will just repeat.
I've aged about 10 years in the last 3 years just due to stress.
I'm sure.
But if you focus on yourself and you say, I can't control this person, I can't control the situation, I'm going to get up and I'm going to eat healthy and I'm going to take care of myself. And one thing I will recommend to a lot of narcissistic victims, because the logical part of your brain, we know, quits working and you begin to run on fight or flight. So you have another part of your brain operating that causes this brain fog. And if you are truly in a narcissistic situation like I was, where it was scary and I feared for my life and I didn't have anywhere to go, and your brain really runs on that fight or flight mode for a good, I would say, 6 months while you're trying to untangle what's happened mentally. I started eating a lot of walnuts and fish and taking fish oil to help with that, with the reconnection of neurons, so that my brain would begin to work in a logical state again very quickly. Our diets are depleted of that. So that's another thing people can do. It's a simple thing. Go over the counter fish oils or eat more fish or eat more walnuts. I noticed a huge impact in the changes in the way I thought and how much I was getting back to the person I was before and being able to think logically, and enjoyed reading. None of those things you can do when you're operating in fight or flight. None. Right. You're simply just trying to make it from one step to the next.
Now, what kind of holistic health adjustments have you made? Like, do you take supplements? What do you do in that regard?
Yes, there's certain herbs that you can actually take, and flower essences for getting over trauma that I have implemented. I've started doing supplements, like I said, for my mind, for my body, eating extremely healthy, detoxifying my body. A lot of people don't understand that trauma, it will settle in areas, and I began to actually have chest pains and throat pain. Some people will have shoulder pain or neck pain, whether it's a parent, a narcissistic parent, or a spouse. If you're dealing with their toxic issues, their projection, their devaluing constantly, you don't want to end up carrying that with you, but you will. And I've actually consulted with people who have gotten cancer over it.
I've heard that for sure. I've heard a couple people say that.
Uterine or cervical cancer.
I think breast cancer too.
Yes, from having this mother wound, having a narcissistic mother that just will not stop. But that's where you have to say, okay, I got to take care of me. I can't let this kill me. Separate. But every day I work out. Every day I work out, whether I want to or not. I've learned to ignore my feelings, because sometimes I can't trust my feelings.
That's a good thing to go over too. I think what really helps with that is journaling and running it by somebody. Or like with AA would say, if you have a sponsor, it's like, no, you run your stuff by, because sometimes you're correct. When someone's in trauma or in the throes of an addiction, it is hard to know what's true and not true, and what's the distortion of thinking and what's reality. And I think that's where it really helps to have someone else to run by things, or at the very least to journal, because that is a thing, right? When someone's in a brain fog or after narcissistic abuse, it can be tough. It can be tough to know what's proportionate. Like, okay, what's a proportionate and appropriate response to this? And it can be tough for people in the beginning.
The journaling is very important. I do that as well. Journaling.
Absolutely.
I haven't got a hold of the shadow workbook, but I want to do that. But working through AA with a sponsor, also being able to connect with other narcissistic abuse or domestic violence victims that I've made friends with along the way, they are your biggest source of support, because they can be your sounding board. They can also tell you, no, that what you're feeling or what you're thinking right now is not a good idea. Let's stop, breathe, let's sit on this, let's pray about it. And before you make a move, or before you do something that you may regret, it could even be something that you legally that you want to do. just stop. And I have thrown my hands up about the whole situation and given it to God at this point, and have focused on me. And the healthier I get, the better I can think, the clearer that my head is. And I realize this is going to play out just how God wants it to. And again, I'm not a churchgoer. I've been manipulated, and that's just, I think a lot of people in our age group and younger are seeing some of the tactics by people in power. And I think it's a common thing now that people are stepping away from.
Well, people notice
church.
it now because of all the channels, all the Instagram accounts and Facebook accounts, YouTube channels that talk about toxic traits, narcissism, gaslighting, all of the tactics, and just talking about the behaviors, regardless of what you call it, I think is pretty important because, regardless of whether it's a narcissistic pastor or just a psychopath pastor or just like someone who has some toxic traits or has some a-hole behaviors, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, what are those behaviors? That's what to pay attention to.
Yeah, and stepping away from any type of relationship when you're trying to heal is crucial. Yeah. Because even just having friends or people trying to get close, you will step right back into another narcissistic relationship because you have this gravitating energy to that. And until you heal and until you are comfortable with putting down boundaries and taking your time with something, you don't even need to go there. That is probably the biggest and best advice I could say. Do not even try.
Because you went quickly, right, from your baby's dad with the 6 kids to this next one. That was a pretty quick transition there. Now, for now, I guess you've been single for a little bit now.
Yes. We're still legally married, and I've seen him roll over relationship. Right. I just decided that's not something that I want to do. One, for my son and my children. My healing and my focus should be on them and getting out from that codependent lifestyle. That is so important. Right. I really believe
single time is important for that, right? Just having a little bit of time, maybe 6 months to kind of sort yourself out, get in touch with yourself, get in touch with what's true, what's not true, develop some interests outside of a romantic relationship. A lot of people, men and women included, they just don't do that. And that work is necessary because if they don't do that work, often they just attract a very similar kind of person. And I see that a lot. And it's because a lot of people, especially as they get older, they don't want to be alone, and some people become more okay alone, but depending on where the woman is in life or the man is, maybe they want a family and then they want kids, but they don't have them yet. They feel rushed. And so instead of taking it easy and kind of letting things unfold, they rush into the next thing, and it gets them in trouble 9 times out of 10.
I have been single almost 2 years.
And
I'm very happy, and I'm very okay with that.
Good.
There's nothing wrong with being single, or I don't know, maybe it's our culture. I don't know, but I'm so happy because Disney. I wake up, I do my thing. There's no argument. There's no control. There's no, you can't go to the store. I had my doorknobs removed. I wasn't allowed to have doorknobs.
Yeah, it's wild.
This person didn't have access at any time. I must be cheating on my phone, up to no good. So I had my doorknobs removed. So, I guess it depends on the level of narcissistic abuse, but if you're in a toxic situation that leads to domestic violence and extreme control, you're okay with being alone.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned to like it. For where I am in life, it would be more difficult for me even to get back into a relationship because then other things come into play. And then it's more like, what's your attachment style? How are you going to handle conflicts with the person you care about? And me personally, where I struggle with women would be, I don't trust them to stick around if their feelings change. And the way I see it, like mature love would be, sometimes feelings come and go. Like just because you might not have that infatuated feeling doesn't mean it's not a good relationship. But some people, I think they really chase that infatuation, honeymoon period feeling. But that's not the way it works. It's supposed to change over time. But a lot of times, for me, and this is my issue with it, if a woman if her feelings change, they'll go. And that's where my trust issues come into play with that, where it's like, I trust myself, but what I also trust a lot of women to do is leave if their feelings change. And I don't know what the right thing to think about with that is. It's like, okay, is that a bad thing to think?
No,
is it just reality? I don't know.
No, it's very real. Our society operates almost systematically on feelings, and that's where narcissism comes into play. Narcissism, they have, arrested development, if you know about that. So they're operating on that limbic system of instant gratification and running on emotions. So that's your extreme. But our society in general is very much into, I'm going to do whatever I want to do or what makes me feel good. And when you step away from that, and I'm a believer in Stoic philosophy, when you step away from that and you realize what I said earlier, I no longer trust my feelings. So let's just say you have a committed relationship. You know, whether it's a marriage, a narcissist or a very selfish person is going to see another woman or man and think, well, I'm getting attention from them. It's okay to cheat or whatever, because that's how I feel at the moment. But truth is that feelings come and go, and that is not a wise move. So like getting into a relationship with a narcissist, I have this honeymoon period. Oh, it feels so good. Yeah, but maybe, just maybe, let's look at logic, let's look at reason, let's look at facts before we jump on the feeling bandwagon. But our society has almost lost all, and I blame a lot of that on our upbringing. I blame a lot of it on the churches, because we're taught, we always want to have this warm and fuzzy feeling about whatever it is we're doing. We're donating to the local shelter. We're doing this, we're doing that to look good. We're doing this to feel good. We're eating this food that is killing our body, but it makes us, it tastes good. We operate on feelings as a society, and that is very unhealthy. So that's why I said I'm happy being single, because I can think through, I can have time, I can push myself to do. I like David Goggins. I make myself do something that sucks every single day. Not because I want to, or not because it feels good, but because it is good, or it's the right thing to do. So
he says embrace the suck, I think is what he says, right?
Yeah, embrace the suck. That's right.
That's what
and if you look at old relationships, that lasted, from 100 years ago, they knew feelings come and went, and it was more about a commitment to do what was right, what was best for your family, the betterment of society. And so you were going to most likely say no to temptation or leaving or addiction.
We know another big thing, I think, is depending on where someone is in life, they're going to be wanting different things, and their motivations are different too. Like when people are younger and they really are only for the feelings, then that's especially true, that when their feelings change, they're going to leave. But as someone gets older, like say maybe a woman's in her 30s and hasn't had kids yet, maybe she's going to be less concerned with that feeling, and she's going to be more concerned with, well, this guy can serve that kind of vision that I have. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I do see that kind of, it changes why people do things. And in a case like that, I would actually trust a woman to stick around more, I think, in a situation like that, because it wasn't as feeling based as it was. No, this is like a little more pragmatic. Right. It's pragmatic and something that could just potentially work out.
Right. Yeah. Evaluating, and we had been to several counseling sessions, but evaluating like your ethics, the way you see the world, your worldview, evaluating like your goals in a relationship, all that stuff is important. Of course, people can fool the therapist, people can fool the preacher, sure. Whatever, but you're really and truly to look at the world for our survival as a species. We can't run on our feelings. Feelings are very deceptive, and they come and go, like you said.
But feelings are not fact, they say, and feelings are not a good indicator of how we're really doing, or the things that I've heard before. But you also have to feel it to heal it too. So there's all sorts of expressions about it that I remember, but it just depends. I think there's a different slogan for each different scenario that you're in life. Like there's a time for feeling it to healing it. There's a time for feelings are not always fact. There's a time for feelings are not a good indicator of how you're doing. It just really depends, because especially with the feelings are not a good indicator of how you're doing, when you break a trauma bond right away and you're trying to go no contact, you might be feeling awful, but you're doing the right thing for yourself. You might be feeling awful, but that's not a good indicator of like, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. It's like, no, it's the opposite. You're doing the right thing. And sometimes when you do the right thing, you got to go through a little uncomfortability before you get to the good place. So it just everything depends on the individual scenario. Because a good thing to hear in one situation could be the worst thing to hear in another situation. I see that a lot with people who would say, well, love will conquer all. It's like, well, depending on where you are, that might be a terrible thing to hear. Like if you're in an abusive relationship, that's not what you need to hear. Love will conquer all. It's like, no, you need to hear
Tina Turner.
Yeah, don't tolerate disrespect and get your butt out of there if you can.
What's love got to do with it?
Right. It just all depends, is what I would say.
Yeah.
So that's why people, and that's what I see a lot of spiritual narcissists do as well. It's like the religious narcissists, they're a little more obvious with it, but the spiritual ones, not as much. They're sneaky with it. They'll try to sneak you into forgiveness and sneak you into accepting abuse. Or they'll flip the script and say, if you don't like something that they did, oh, that's just your ego talking. Or I know, and they'll put you in lose-lose. They love putting it in a lose-lose, where they'll say something like, well, just the fact that you're even talking about this means that you're ego-driven. And just the fact that you're even just debating. Or
that you hold a grudge.
Something
that
like
you're
that.
Bitter.
Right?
You haven't forgiven. You haven't let go.
Yeah. So they got a way to put you in a lose-lose, where if you keep on talking, you're proving they're right, they're going to say, and that you're bitter of this or this. But if you don't keep on talking, then by default, it's like you're letting them be right, which isn't always the right thing to do, depending on the scenario, right? But ultimately, that's why it's important for us to live by our own principles and live in accordance to what we think is right. And don't try to jump through people's hoops, because I think when people try to jump through people's hoops, they get themselves into trouble. And you got to really understand
lose your identity.
Yeah.
Whether
and that's how it happens. That's how it happens.
Whether it's finances or whether it's control, like I couldn't go to the store without a child, or I was whoring around. You lose your identity trying to please this person, and you have to realize they're never going to be pleased. So you're wasting your time, you're losing yourself, and you're allowing yourself to incur all this abuse for no reason.
Right.
And in the end, you're going to be devalued, you're going to be discarded, you're going to be cheated on, and you're like, that's where like the trauma bond, you have to look at it for what it is, the brain fog, and it's like quitting dope. That's why I believe a lot of people who are victims of abuse end up addicted. It's like, that's the dope man. And I actually had a counseling session with a girl who was telling me about some crazy things she did for her narcissistic partner that she's walking away from. And I told her, I said, she goes, why did I do that? And I said, because that's your dope man. Yeah. They gave you that hit of dopamine.
The Narc Pipe, they call it.
Okay, I didn't even know it had a name.
Yeah.
But I said, you
hit off the Narc Pipe, this one guy would call it. What was it called? Narcissism Unscripted, or Narcology, I think the guy was called. I haven't seen him around for a minute. But he would call it the Narc Pipe. And he would say, when you're no contact, don't be going back to take a hit off that Narc Pipe during the love bombing.
That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I told her. I said, you don't think of it as an addiction, but it's just like heroin.
It is.
That's your dope man. And she had actually put herself in a very dangerous and could have gone bad situation. And she's like, why did I do that? Why did I put my life on the line for this? And I said, because that was your dope man. You didn't realize it, but you were addicted.
And that's part of it too, right? Where anyone who's been in a relationship with a narcissist or some kind of abuser, they've really got to figure out what was in it for them. And they can't just say nothing. They can't just say the trauma bond, because that's not completely accurate. Like there was something else where maybe it was you weren't happy and single. That's a big one for a lot of them. Maybe the boundaries weren't quite as strong as they could have been. Maybe you weren't assertive. Maybe you overlooked red flags. Maybe you already had a little bit of low sense of self-worth. But whatever it was, there was usually something. And so that made you more susceptible to the love bombing. And that love bombing, when you have that leaking sense of self-worth, love bombing can feel great. Love bombing, if you need it, you need that feeling, then all of a sudden a love bombing can make you feel like $1 million. But just the fact that someone else's validation and approval and love made you feel that much different, that's a red flag in and of itself to me.
Yes, like, no, and like I said, I'll go back to my upbringing with my mom, and I see this in Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. She has a very narcissistic mother, and I predict her situation could turn out similar to mine. But a very controlling and narcissistic parent will allow you to grow up with a hole in your love cup, so that when you finally find this magical person that hits all the bells and whistles, and you get married in 6 weeks, you don't realize that you should have addressed that already. But we don't know a lot of this, and it's because of people like you that this is becoming bigger, and people are grasping the realities of it. Well, I needed to deal with my childhood trauma. I needed to heal from whatever it was that I didn't get from my parents that I thought I was getting in this person. Right. And it's taken on a little bit of self-responsibility in that aspect. I'm not victim blaming or shaming, but it is true that we are a lot more susceptible to that. The dope man.
Taylor Swift. I think she's been with some narcissistic guys. I think she would say that maybe John Mayer, I think she considered narcissistic. But if she was consistently attracting guys that were not good for her, that would mean to me she's got to take a look at her side of the street and something. Where there's something not quite right. Maybe it's ignoring the red flags. Maybe it's having a hole in the love cup, like you said, where they're even though she's, an attractive woman, beautiful woman.
Take a look at this. She's still in the toxic cycle. Like, her mom still travels with her. Her mom still picks out her clothes. Her mom still tells her.
Oh, she does. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So she may be feeling like she wants to pull away from that situation, but she is still very codependent. So she's going to gravitate right into a very similar situation where someone's going to have total control.
Well, here's the thing with people like her, right? Where if they get famous at a young age, I think she was pretty young when she got famous, like maybe 18, 19, I don't know. But she's like maybe 33 now, I think. But when you get rich and famous at such a young age, a lot of times they have an arrested development a little bit where it stunts their emotional maturity. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening with her exactly, but it wouldn't surprise me if something like that was happening, because it does do something to you where all of a sudden
to be 33,
millions and millions of people, billions maybe even, are loving her on and cheering her, and then she's become a millionaire, multimillionaire, almost a billionaire now.
It's and you can thank her mother for that. To be 33 or however old she is, and have her mom still pick out her clothes, have her travel with her, have her oversee her finances. Her mom does a heck of a lot for a grown woman. And I feel like you said, maybe she's emotionally immature, but she'll move from that codependent situation to another codependent situation. So that's just what I see from afar. It mirrors. I wouldn't say my mom was that controlling. She didn't have that much power, though she tried.
Right.
But yeah.
That was a big thing people said with the Super Bowl. I made a post about how Travis Kelce got in Andy Reid's face. And at the time, it did look a little disrespectful to me. But like on the scale of 1 to 10, it was like, to me, 10 being the worst, 1 being nothing. I was like, it's like a 2 or a 3. But just the fact that I made a post about it, some people were going off the rails that I even made a post about it. And I was like, it's just something to talk about. It's not like that bad, but it's something to pay attention to. It's not something I would say is good. But you know what got people even more upset is when I made a post about Jason Kelce and his wife. And I said I admired that his wife kind of avoided the spotlight and was humble. But people thought I was comparing her to Taylor Swift. And oh, Lord, people got really upset about that. Because if you're a man, especially if you're a man, you can't be comparing women, or all of a sudden they're going to come at you. But that wasn't even what my goal was with that. I was like, I was just admiring the fact that she was humble. But they said, no, that was pretty pointed that you said humble. And I was like, I really wasn't even thinking in that direction. But I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised at the directions people take things in. But
Yeah.
that got me the most flack. But even just mentioning the Travis Kelce thing, that got me flack too. Because people were like, shut up. Why are you even talking about it?
Because we want to, we were raised with the like Sleeping Beauty and the princess thing, and we want to believe that this is going to be like romance, 101, and they'll live happily ever after. Not that they're like real people and with real issues and have baggage, and but that's just the make-believe world we like to live in.
Where's Disney? I mean, Disney, I think, sets people up for love addiction, or idealizing the perfect love. That's pretty much what it does. And the happily ever after is just when the people get together. But in reality, and you see all of these people talking about narcissism, that's the part of the story after that. That's the part of the story that Disney stopped at. So it's like, no, that could be the love bombing phase, but after that, what happens then? Disney doesn't do too many movies about devaluing and discards. No, they do lots of movies about maybe love bombing, which maybe it's love bombing, maybe it's not. But regardless, they skip the real work. The real work is what happens once you're together, because anyone can have fun in like the honeymoon phase and in the lustful phase. But once 6 months to a year goes by, what then? What then?
What happens when you throw a boundary out there? How's the other person going to react? What happens when you talk about your future or marriage, finances, any of that stuff?
That's the things to pay attention to. I mean, and that's my narcissism test too. It's like if you say a boundary, disagree with someone, or tell them no, and then see how they respond to that. Yes. And if you do one of those three things and they go wild, or say you're just so ridiculous, so silly, so dumb, over-exaggerating, or overreacting, whatever it is, it's like, if you're going to get an invalidating response, probably something to pay attention to.
Right.
So, the simple things. I talk about those simple things because in the moment, when things are tough, when you're being love bombed, or if you're in a trauma bond, those little slogans and those little things can be like the one thing you hold on to, instead of going back to something not so good or overlooking something that might not be too good. So that's why I'm big on those sayings, whether it's JADE, justify, argue, defend, explain, or DEAR, defend, excuse, explain, rationalize. Those little things can be the one thing that saves you. Because that's like in the moment. What's that?
If you will pay attention.
Yes. And I've seen it happen for myself even. Like those little things will pop up in the moment where if you don't have that at your disposal, you don't have that in your toolbox, it just doesn't work. You're not going to think of it, and then you'll go off in the wrong direction. But that toolbox can save you. You had put
up a TikTok not too long ago about the narcissist and their jokes, and they love to get in those little jokes or those little gigs or those backhanded comments. And I thought, wow, those are just one of many red flags. But if we could just remove ourselves and say, looking at this logically, that's where we fall into that feeling phase. If we could look at this and see all these things are adding up to something that could be dangerous, could be very potentially, I know I will say it was dangerous for me and for my children.
Sure.
But it was that feelings over facts.
And I think that's a good way for people to look at it too. If someone's having a hard time putting themselves first, if they have kids, try to put your kids first in the situation and say, okay, maybe I'm having a hard time doing something good for me, but what about my kids?
Right.
Maybe I should try to do something good for them. Not that they wouldn't, but angling it in that direction where you think of it, okay, what's the best thing for my kids in this situation? And then try to do it that way. Because I think for some parents, it's going to be easier for them to do something good for their kids than it is for themselves.
Yeah. Let them be your why. Because
there
if
you go.
really and truly, like, we're living in a way that is so dangerous to the survival of our species in our day and time, whether it's the toxic stuff that we have to go through, the trauma, whether it's the divorce rate, whether it's, what we eat, whether it's, I mean, we're just really teeter-tottering on, is our species even going to survive? I mean, we're living like pampered children.
Well, there's a lot of emotional immaturity, I would say. And I think AI can be a thing. And I think social media is not really helping our discourse too much. I think people can try to use social media for good. I think I try to use social media for good. And you can reach more people now than you ever could before, ever in the history of humans. That's what social media has done. And I don't even think people stop to take the time to appreciate that sometimes, that this access to millions of people that anyone could have just from their phones, that's never been done in humans' history. And we don't even know what the consequences are. We're still kind of working that stuff out. But
exactly. Yeah.
The discourse, especially in the political world and maybe the social justice world, very polarizing, very toxic. And I think this is where I see what I would consider collective narcissism and collective black and white thinking, where people really struggle with nuance and they really struggle with the shades of gray, where it's like, oh, you're either all the way over here or you're all the way over here. And it's not much in between.
I'll be honest with you. Being a critical thinker, I don't know if do you remember Ron Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a Ron Paul supporter.
From Kentucky, I think he was, wasn't he?
Well, that might be his son, Rand Paul. But
okay.
This was just after 9/11. Ron Paul was a congressman who ran for the Republican ticket. He had previously ran as a libertarian. And man, he hit all the marks on both sides, and he was really starting to pull together a following. And there was the big Tea Party movement and a lot of things going on at that time.
I remember now. And Trump beat him.
Well, he had actually gotten the Republican ticket, and they gave it to Mitt Romney. That kind of just blew my faith in the whole system that we have going on. And I don't know, but I agree. Everything is very polarizing because, see, he was starting to unite people. And Mitt Romney, was going to be extreme Republican and Mormon and Utah and go gun rights and all this. And then, over here you've got Obama, and it was just so far. I didn't feel like either one represented. I didn't vote because I thought it was just a puppet show.
Right.
But yeah,
that was the beginning. 2008. 2008 was the beginning of like the real social media era. But it wasn't really until these are what really changed it, when everybody got a computer in their pocket. That's what to me, it wasn't the internet as much, because when the internet was only at home, or if you brought a laptop somewhere, that wasn't as intrusive. But now that everyone has the smartphone, that's what really changed it to me. And I can really demarcate my life. I'm 38. So there was the time before the smartphones, which for me was till I was about 24. I didn't get one till I was about 24, but they came out a couple years before that. And now there's post-smartphone life. And post-smartphone life is completely different. It's completely different. And I think it's progressing pretty rapidly now. And I don't know, the rate of change is so quick that in 5 years, 10 years, I don't even know how life's going to look. I'm a little worried to even think about how life's going to look, but it's just so different now. And it's happening fast. But before we get off into the tangent here, and I don't want to forget, you have a website you wanted to mention, and do you have a title of your book yet?
No. I'm working through the book, and when you actually sit down and have to relive some of what I've lived through, it is so hurtful that sometimes you just have to set it down and go, I can't do this, and walk away for months.
Sure.
But my website is missysnaturals.com. Missy is a nickname for Melisa. And I have my natural products that I sell, my own line of essential oils, as well as some holistic counseling if people who are dealing with, wanting to lose weight, having issues with diet, I can work integratedly with a physician on many things, or a therapist on many things. So I do the holistic counseling and have the products there on the website at missysnaturals.com.
Yeah, I'm big into the natural stuff myself because a lot of the psychiatrists, I think, they like to push the psych meds, and I'm not completely against psych meds. I think if they help someone, so be it. But I also think people should try natural stuff first. Like, I don't care where people get their results from, as long as it works, right?
Well, interestingly enough, now that because of social media and technology, we are just now finding out that there are some very wealthy people that have been measuring their frequencies and using magnetic frequencies to adjust their own body's energy. And a lot of people, who are victims of abuse they don't know it unless they have it tested, and they do have machines to do that you can test your body's frequency. Is basically a measurable amount of energy in your body. So you can say, I'm operating in the frequency of authenticity, which is supposed to be the highest, which you can actually measure on a machine. But frequency, you're like a little cell phone, and you operate basically like an electrical system, our brain, our spinal cord, all that. But we have this measurable amount of energy in our body, which begins to lower and cause us to be sick. And especially when we're in traumatic or toxic environments, it erodes our health. And
I'd be curious how they do it. I'd be curious how they measure it, and like what that test is like. I would do it. I would do it just for fun.
You can look. One is called the Zyto hand cradle, and you can just literally set your hand on there, and you can bring things into your area. And as they get closer to your body, your frequency will either raise or lower. They can use medicines, they can use herbs, they can use essential oils, they can use foods, but you will see your body's frequency rise or lower based on. So I wonder what would happen if you brought a narcissist in there.
I don't know. I know, and some of this is lore, some of it is not. But they'll say sometimes the narcissists have a dead eye, where it's like a doll's eye. They have no emotion, or their smiles doesn't touch their eye, to use a Stephen King expression. There is some of that, where I've seen a little bit of that, where they have that deadpan look, where maybe they can even smile, but the smile doesn't touch their eyes, or just no emotion in them. It's just something to pay attention to. And of course, it's really hard to pinpoint it.
I've seen the eyes go black, and I do believe that there is some form of evil or diminished or low vibrational
something.
There's something going on there, because when they don't get their way and they lash out, especially when they get violent, and they can just, it just becomes like a different person. Black eyes, hatred, no going back, no stopping, no putting the brakes on, thinking that, I'm going to go too far, I'm going to hurt somebody. I definitely feel
something, maybe like a low empathy look or something. But whatever it is, sometimes your face communicates it, right? Their face will communicate that look, and it's something to pay attention to if somebody sees it, for sure. But all right, Melisa, I think we could wrap it up here, unless there's anything else you wanted to mention here.
No. I'm very appreciative of your time. Thank you for interviewing me.
My pleasure. You're very welcome. And I think your story is very important to get out there, because there's a lot of people in your spot. And we'll let them know when your book's finished too, so they can check that out as well.
If you want to look me up on YouTube, it is Missy's Holistic Health and Healing. Also, I have stopped putting a lot about what I'm going through in my divorce up, because of a lot of backlash from him and his family. They need to keep it a secret. So I may not have a ton of that up there right now, but I will when this is final. I will have a lot more out.
And Melisa and Little Ben Corley on TikTok too. And you want to give them your Facebook?
It's just Melisa Corley, and you'll see on there I'm just a digital creator, and I put a lot of TikToks up, and I do, again, I try to touch on the narcissism, but they give me, they'll file something in court or claim I'm harassing, or so I have to, it's touch and go.
Okay. Oh, they do that. Oh, that's wild.
Oh yeah, they put 2 felony warrants out for my arrest just for putting up the fact that I had put up some bruises. I put up that someone had broken our house. It was my ex. And I called the police and they wouldn't come check it out. So then, yes, they used a family connection, the aunt, who was a judge, and put a false felony charge on me for cyber stalking. But they didn't they weren't able to clarify that just because I put this up on YouTube, what had happened about the domestic violence and the break-in and the cops ignoring it. So then they spun it that I was cyber stalking, harassing, emails and Facebook, but he had cut my internet off. I could not have cyber stalked anybody, sent an email out or anything because my internet was cut off. It was again in his name. There you go, financial control. I couldn't work. It's a whole rabbit trail. So I'm trying to be very careful about what I put up right now so that I can make it through this safely, and then the floodgates will open up.
Good. No, I totally get it. But you're doing good work, and I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you, and I love listening to your TikToks and YouTube. Thank you.
I'm going to keep them coming. All righty, Melisa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over and out, everybody.
Day.